not the least, it is probably one of the most important sessions, and I think one that we're all interested in knowing a little bit more about. And as a result, again, before we continue on with this, I hope you are feeling that those three items that we talked about at the beginning of this conference, trusted partnership, resources, and connection. And here is the ultimate connection, I think, around all three of those items. We are extremely fortunate today to have Beckie Bean with us. Beckie is an accessibility consultant with the Governor's Office of Information Technology, and she'll walk us through Colorado's accessibility compliance in HB 211110 and what you need to know to get your organization up to speed. So without further ado, Beckie, thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up. Awesome. So thank you so much for being here. Like you said, I'm Beckie Bean. I'm an accessibility consultant in the Technology Accessibility Program at the Governor's Office of Information Technology. Say that one 5 times fast. And then today, what we're really going to focus on is what do government agencies and public entities need to do right now in their accessibility planning. So we're going to start at the absolute beginning and then go all the way through until continuous improvement. So let's get into it. So the first thing I really want to emphasize is that everyone's journey with accessibility will be different, and that's okay. I'm going to say that one more time. That is okay. It's definitely going to be different depending on what organizational structures you have, how far along you are in your planning process, and as long as we get there in the end, that is the goal. So on that note, I wanted to also emphasize that you do not need to be a tech expert to start accessibility planning. I myself was not a tech expert when we started accessibility planning. My background was in communications, and before that, marketing, sales, and customer service. But when I was promoted at the Department of Revenue to be the digital content manager for them, it also put me in charge of leading the accessibility program that eventually led to a plan at DOR, and then I got recruited over to OIT to help even more agencies do the work. And also a lot of professionals in this space didn't start in accessibility. They come from all walks of life, all professions, and a variety of IT disciplines. And so today we're going to first start talking about what is IT accessibility. We get that question, so I really want to level set. How to begin planning, how to begin implementation, and then if you're a super rock star, continuous maintenance and process improvement if you've already done your testing and remediation. So let's start off with a show of hands. Who here has heard about IT accessibility before? Ooh, that's great. Almost everybody raised their hand. Awesome. Well, for those of you who didn't, I like to start off with why is accessibility important before I get into the what. So over 1 million people in Colorado identify as having a disability. And one thing that I really like to highlight is this is largely underreported because a lot of folks don't personally identify as having a disability. Like me, when I was growing up, I could barely hear. They said it was like hearing at the bottom of a swimming pool. But if you had asked me if I had a disability, I would have been like, no, I just can't hear well. Like, I don't understand what you're talking about. So that's largely underreported. And then still, unfortunately, some people do feel stigma around that label in particular, and they just don't want to call it out. So I would probably argue that more than 1 in 4 people in Colorado have a disability, but that's what the CDC says. And then the other reason why it's important is it is a civil right in the state of Colorado. And we haven't emphasized this a bunch as an IT organization up to this point, but I think it's really important to emphasize that a civil right is a guarantee of equal protection under the law. It's a guarantee. And that it's essential to our democracy to ensure equal access to our services, our programs, the democratic process. And, people with disabilities are just like any other group in a protected class. You should be giving them the same level of access as everyone else. You wouldn't go to somebody else in a different protected status and refuse them service. So I always like to ask, why people with disabilities? Why now? And think through that as an individual person. And then what is IT accessibility? So information technology accessibility is the processes and practices that an organization can use to ensure equal access to all of their programs and services, and that includes people with disabilities. And then it works by complying with accessibility standards. So the state of Colorado has adopted accessibility standards. Currently, they're the World Wide Web Consortium's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, version 2.1. I did not put that on the slide because any day now, 2.2 is coming out. And the way that the statute is written is as soon as it's adopted by the World Wide Web Consortium, it becomes law in the state of Colorado. So definitely watch this space. By the end of the calendar year, they expect to be rolling that out. And if you want more information, please visit the OIT website, oit.colorado.gov/accessibility-statement. And then what kind of brought us all here and why I have a job is House Bill 211110. A lot of you probably are already familiar with this legislation, but it made it a civil rights violation in the state of Colorado. It amended the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act to include this. It also gave OIT the statutory authority to set accessibility standards in the state of Colorado, and it set the deadline for all of us to become compliant with accessibility standards at July 1st, 2024. But then again, in this last legislative session, Senate Bill 23-244 amended House Bill 211110, and it did make some really important changes that I really want to highlight here. One of the big ones is it did make an allowance for reasonable accommodations. So that is something that is sort of a hallmark in the ADA space, so it made that part of the law now as well. And then it also asked my agency, OIT, to promulgate rules to help better clarify IT accessibility requirements, and we'll be doing that here very shortly, but we don't have any rules to talk about today, unfortunately. And then it also clarifies that a violation is per product. So, for example, if you had a website that had 5 images without alt text, that would be a single violation, not 5. But when this bill passed, a great deal of misconceptions sort of started to bubble up. And so I really wanted to address some of those here today. So accessibility continues to be a civil right in the state of Colorado. That did not change. The deadline did not change. So all state and local governments need to be compliant with accessibility guidelines by July 1st, 2024. And the fines were not taken away. They were just clarified. And so I'm going to read this verbatim. Any Colorado government entity that doesn't meet the state of Colorado accessibility standards could be subject to injunctive relief, meaning a court order to fix the problem, actual monetary damages, or a fine of $3,500 per product payable to the plaintiff who needs to be a person with a disability. So now that we got all the legal stuff out of the way, let's talk about it. So again, by show of hands, how many people have actually started accessibility planning at their organization? Nice, almost everyone again, that's great. Good job. So we are going to start at the beginning and go over that really quick. So there's 3 components to that. So the first one, create an accessibility planning team or a work group or a task force, whatever you want to call it. The name doesn't matter, the people matter. Inventory your digital assets and IT systems, and then draft an accessibility plan. So we'll get into that in a little more detail. So the step 1 is assemble a team. It needs to be multidisciplinary. It needs to cover all of the different components of your organization's operations and services. And so some common roles that should be included but are not limited to these people is executive leadership. First and foremost, they set the direction. They help clear the way and eliminate roadblocks for people working on this work. So executive leadership needs to be involved in this work. Human resources. I'm a state employee. Most of us here are state employees, and we know how important our human resources folks are. So make sure that they are involved in this work all along the way. finance, budget, and procurement for obvious reasons. Communications and content creators. That's how I got into this work, is I used to work in communications. Your project managers and your program managers. And then administration and operations managers. They are not exempt from accessibility. They need to be included, and they need to also be setting direction for their teams. And then for those of you in IT, folks that are like full stack and web developers, UX professionals, product owners, and testers all should be involved in this process. Step 2, the most important step in my opinion, is to inventory your assets. I spent like a solid year inventorying assets at Revenue, and I still don't feel like we were ever done, because it's just that important to really get your arms around the scope of this work. If you don't have a good understanding at the beginning about how big the scope is going to be, every time you turn around, you're going to feel like there's some new thing that's cropping up that you forgot about or someone was working on. My favorite was there was some websites we found for a program that got sunset like 5 years prior, and we're like, how is this still here? So it's very important to inventory everything. And so I put a sample inventory here on the slide, and it's just make sure you capture the name if it has a URL, the homepage's URL, whether or not you've tested it, both automated or manual, whether or not you can confirm that it's accessibility compliant, and then you can just keep going with that inventory all the way through to the end of remediation. It's just a slide, so I couldn't quite get all of that onto one little slide. And then once you have an idea of the scope and you have your team created, then you can draft your accessibility plan. And it should have 6 core criteria. My team went over the 6 core criteria last year at the user conference, so if you want to know more about them in more detail, please visit our website. But they are governance, roles and responsibilities, evaluation and remediation, skills and training, communications and support, procurement and vendor management, and then IT product roles and the software development lifecycle. And these will help you organize your plans and kind of get your arms around the different pieces of accessibility planning. Because I know when I first started, it was just, I like to call it the tyranny of the blank page, where it's just like, I don't know where to begin. So start with these 6 things and then go from there. And then once you have your plan crafted, that's when you can get into implementation. And in implementation, there are 4 steps as well. It's create a culture of accessibility. This is very important. IT accessibility testing and remediation. I feel like that one's probably pretty obvious. Procuring accessible IT, and then working with your vendors on getting any corrections that are required. And then create an accommodations plan. I would say that is at the end, because it's very important to have an accessibility first mindset when you're doing this work. If you leap all the way to accommodations without addressing any of the other steps, you're doing yourself and your agency a big disservice. So, step 4 in the larger steps, create a culture of accessibility. This is not going to be something where you can get to the end, check the box, and be like, yes, I am done. I wish it was, but it is not. So make sure that you are fostering a culture of accessibility in your organization. And that starts with the skills and training accessibility planning core criteria. So make sure that you've added accessibility to folks' job descriptions. I don't know how many times I've heard, well, I'm sorry, that's just not in my job description. And it's like, you're right, it's not, I'm sorry. So make sure that you're looping in your human resources teams to get your position descriptions and qualifications all updated, working with the managers to make sure that they've added it to the next year's performance plans. This is a really holistic effort, but you really need to make sure that you do that extra work so that you can't come to, June 30th and someone's like, oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't in my job description. Also, ensure that the staff has the training that they need to succeed. I, for one, needed training, and I work in this space. I continue to need training. Like, this is one of those things where nobody, at least at the state that I've found, unless you are my manager and my leads, knew all about accessibility from the beginning. So it's very important to do training and to keep training and keep your skills up. And then also train managers and update systems to ensure that your hiring is accessible. This is a big area of opportunity we're finding, so work with your human resources teams on ensuring that you can hire people with disabilities, because they will be the best people to help set an organizational culture of accessibility, and they're also woefully underemployed. But that is another presentation for another day. Also, incorporate it into your organizational culture. So we're big fans of change management plans at OIT, so recommend doing a change management plan as a part of your accessibility planning. Incorporate it into your organization's equity, diversity, and inclusion plans, if it's not already. And then identify and leverage change leaders in your organization. They may not be actual, leaders in the traditional sense, but they have a strong level of influence. They can set direction. They're that go-to person in your organization that has been there for 20 years and knows everything about everything. Those are the people that you want to loop in and make sure that are included. And all of these are links, so whenever you get the slide deck, you can click on them and learn more. And then continuing into step 5, IT accessibility testing is super important. There are 2 types of testing. There's automated evaluation, which uses an IT tool to automatically evaluate websites. There's some pros and cons here. The big pro is it runs automatically. It can push reports to employees to help them proactively manage IT accessibility, which will come up in a later step. And it can find issues that a human tester may miss. I don't know about you, but when I look at a color, I can't say that it has like a 3.5:1 contrast ratio. I mean, I can ballpark it, but an accessibility evaluation tool can actually say, this is the exact contrast ratio of this color to the color next to it. Some cons, they only catch about 20 to 30% of accessibility issues. They cannot evaluate applications. They're really only for websites. They can also provide false positives depending on how the website is coded, and it may require research to understand what the system is trying to tell you. So the gold standard of accessibility evaluation is manual testing. That's performed by a qualified human tester who will manually review a website and application to identify accessibility issues. It is the best practice to utilize manual testing as a part of your accessibility planning. You cannot just skip this step. It's very important. Some pros are qualified humans are able to detect more accessibility issues than an algorithm. They can evaluate complex features and see if they're compliant with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. They can also provide you guidance on how to fix the issue. And since they're human, they can answer questions. We haven't gotten there yet with technology. And then it's not limited to HTML websites. You can do applications, you can do software. They can test pretty much anything that is IT related that has an interface. Some cons, it does take a little bit more organizational resources to manage that process, and it can cost a little bit more, but it is the gold standard, and as people like to say, you get what you pay for. And then once you have your test results, and only once you have your test results, you can begin remediation. I don't recommend starting remediation until you have test results in hand, because oftentimes you won't have a full understanding of the scope of the work without those test results. And then once you have these test results and you want to begin remediation, be sure to prioritize your systems that you're going to remediate so that you're not really spending a lot of resources on a system that's not widely utilized. So first and foremost, test the things that have a high impact to your community and constituents and a high impact to your organization's strategy. Second, test things that have a high impact to your community, because it's community first, and a low strategic impact. Third is the stuff that has a high strategic impact, but a low community impact. And fourth would be low community impact and low strategic impact. And these are the systems, too, that you might want to think through. Do we still need to utilize this if it has such a low impact, or can we sunset this? And if you want more information, we went into a lot of detail about prioritization in our latest newsletter, and that is at oit.colorado.gov/accessibility/news/September-2023. And then the next step is procuring accessible IT and working with your vendors. It's very, very important that you prioritize procuring accessible IT whenever you have the opportunity to do so. You don't want to throw good money after bad. So it's very important to prioritize procuring accessible IT. I am repeating this on purpose, I promise. So, and you also want to make sure that you're doing it for both internal and external use. We have requirements as both employers and as providers of government services. And then you need to expressly include accessibility requirements and outcomes in your contracts. If you're a state of Colorado agency, DPAs are rock stars, and they've already put this into the contract template as of July of last year. So if you're using the right templates, you are golden. When you're writing your requests for proposals and requests for information, clearly state your accessibility requirements up front so that they can provide you with a solution that best fits your needs and your constituents' needs. And then verify the product's accessibility with the vendor by asking for an accessibility conformance report. A lot of folks will also call this a VPAT, or a voluntary product accessibility template. An accessibility conformance report is that filled out, essentially. And then partner with subject matter experts if you want or need help, so that you are doing the best that you can to review potential products before you buy them. It's very important to do all of this legwork before you sign the check, because it's a lot harder to unring that bell once you do. And then on the systems that you already have, it's really important to establish strong vendor relationships and work with them to improve the accessibility of the products you already have. It's not going to work if you're just like, well, they said no, I'm not going to fix this. You got to work with them and make sure that they have a roadmap in place to fix the issues that you have found in your testing, and have a plan to remediate them so that you can provide this to your constituents who are going to probably ask for it. And then OIT and then Section 508.gov from the federal government, we've put together some tools to help with this. So I'm not going to read these off, but we have a bunch of links on this slide as well that can help you get started. And then finally, after we've done all of this, that's when you will do the accommodation plan. But it's very, very important to work with your organization's legal team. We in OIT are not attorneys, and so it's very important that when you are crafting this plan, that you've looped in, if you're a state agency, your assistant attorney general, or if you have a legal team that you want to utilize. And then make sure that anything you come up with complies with all local, state, and federal guidelines for people with disabilities. And then it tracks the accommodations requested, especially if there's frequently requested accommodations. You might want to reconsider the prioritization you've given that particular system to sort of jump it to the front of the line to be remediated. And then finally, after all of that, you can get to the continuous maintenance and process improvement stage. And that is where you operationalize accessibility, you do ongoing accessibility monitoring, and then you do a continuous accessibility improvement model. So step 8 here is operationalize accessibility. Basically, you just bake it into your operations in every possible way that you can. Some big things to ask yourself are, how do we attain and maintain accessibility compliance? What does accessibility compliance success look like to the staff? Have we acquired and appropriated the necessary tools and funds for this work? Does everyone know how to get help with their questions or requests? Have we engaged with our community members, customers, and constituents to see if our accessibility and accommodations plans work for them? And then, did we incorporate any feedback we received into our plans to better serve our customers? And then next, ongoing accessibility monitoring. And this is where automated evaluation is actually very, very helpful, because it is the most effective way to maintain accessibility once you've gotten there. So OIT, we provide Site Improve to state and local agencies. And if you want to get more help with that, you can email us at oit_accessibility@state.co.us, and that will be on the questions slide at the end. And then what you want to do is make sure that you have set really clear roles and responsibilities for folks that are doing this accessibility work on an ongoing basis. So number one, and really the most important thing, communicate how employees and customers can report accessibility issues. Make sure that it's very obvious on how to do it and that you have multiple different ways to report it. Don't just have an email address, phone number, maybe your mailing address. However people feel most comfortable or most able to communicate with you, you need to meet them where they are. And then also clearly identify individuals who are responsible for this work, and establish expectations for the frequency, method, and scope of any evaluations that you're going to do. Make sure that you acquire the tools that you need to do it, and then make sure you have a standard operating procedure that helps anyone who is responsible do this work on an ongoing basis. And then finally, step 10, we're almost there, guys. Continuous accessibility improvement. So it is a cycle for a reason. You want to start off with the plan that we talked about. Then after every step, communicate everything for the plan. And then move to evaluation, remediate, and then a big step that we didn't talk about previously, reevaluate. If you evaluated something and it needed substantial rework to make it accessible, evaluate it again to make sure that the work was okay. And also check for cascading issues. Oftentimes what could happen is you fixed one accessibility issue, but then because of how it was coded, it created other accessibility issues. We've run into this with some of our websites already, so just make sure you incorporate this in, and then always be reviewing and continuously monitoring, and then whenever anyone flags an accessibility issue, you go around this cycle again until forever. This is an ongoing process. But the last thing I wanted to leave you with too is everyone should have access to government services, employment, and the democratic process. And the state of Colorado is committed to making that a reality. And the time is now to begin. We have just a little over 9 months until July 1st, 2024. So this is the time to dig deep and get into this because we only have 9 months until the deadline, and we all have a lot of work to do, OIT included. So I really want everyone to walk away from this with this slide deck and just be ready to get into it because we don't have a whole lot of time left. And if you have questions, you can reach out to my team at OIT_accessibility@state.co.us or check out our website, which is oit.colorado.gov/accessibility. If you need to reach out to me, my email is Beckie, which is Beckie with an IE, .bean@state.co.us. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn too if you'd like. But does anyone have any questions right now? Yes.
I apologize, I missed the first few minutes, but did you mention when the regulations are going to be issued by you all relating to what we need to do?
Yes, so we are working on a rulemaking plan right now. We've hired a policy analyst. Her name is Alice. She's doing great work. So we hope to have our first batch of rules all the way through the process by the end of the calendar year, but it'll be an ongoing process there's a lot of areas to cover, so we'll have more information on that soon.
Okay, and that will be a public process, right? So
Correct.
we'll be able to comment on
Yes.
the various iterations before they're finalized, but the goal is to have the regulations finalized by the end of the year.
Yes, and that is a very ambitious goal. I fully acknowledge that for everybody who's familiar with rulemaking.
And I'm on the email list to receive updates, and I haven't received any updates, and that's because nothing's happened yet. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I have one more quick question, again, because I missed the beginning. What about social media? What's our, under the law, what are we required to do relating to social media? Is that included, or what are we looking at here?
So if it's a platform issue, that is the purview of the actual social media provider, but your content does need to be accessible to the fullest extent you can on that particular platform. So if it allows for alt text, make sure you're doing alt text. If you do videos, natively caption them so that it will show up no matter whether or not they have captioning on the platform. Like things like that are what would be the responsibility of the agencies.
Great, thanks.
Anyone else? Yes.
I do some of the training for the county, Humboldt County, and I'm just wondering, do you have information to help make sure that we're training people effectively and giving them, the correct information where, your legalities are in place and you're not, giving them the wrong information?
Currently, I'm actually one of the partners for training for the state. We're focusing on state of Colorado agencies. We hope to get a local government program rolled out here very shortly. But in the short run, just email OIT_accessibility@state.co.us, and it'll get routed to our senior solution engineer who helps with local governments. Anyone else? Yes, in the back. Middle back.
I had a specific instance where I had an accommodation letter and I was told this was an approved accommodation. So I put in the OIT purchase approval form, and it got rejected and declined. So I'm sort of wondering where the balance is between the accommodation letter and OIT approving or disapproving. I mean, I understand the need for security, but some of the accessibility products are, they're not totally in the US. Not everyone's going to do that. So maybe that's going to come out a little bit. There seems to be a need for a better balance of those things.
Thank you for that. And yes, we definitely acknowledge that, and we are trying to work on our processes. For the rest of the group, anything that comes for an employee accommodation in particular needs to be an approved software solution from the state. And we do have to be secure because we are the government, so there are sometimes a little bit of a push and pull between accessibility and security. Yes?
On that tangent, is it possible, let's say an employee requests Otter AI or live transcribes, says, this is the software that I use, and if OIT were to decline it and say, no, you can't use that, is it possible for the employee to then use like their personal cell phone and their personal account and maybe pay for it themselves because that works for them without requiring that whole OIT approval process, as long as it doesn't interface with any, like they're not using a state computer or a state phone to use it?
I would say work with human resources on that one, just because this is getting into some out of my lane kind of stuff. But we do have Otter AI that is available already. And then also we have a solution that we're working on a wider communications plan for. It's called AIRA, A-I-R-A. It's a visual interpretation service. It's free for everyone else. OIT pays for it. And so you can use it for members of the public who are visiting your offices, or employees who need some visual interpretation of a system that is not currently accessible. And so again, and you can get more information. It's oit.colorado.gov/IRA, which is A-I-R-A. Down in front.
I know it's hard to guess now, but like penalty-wise for non-compliance when this does kick in next year, there's speculation, just a complete unknown to there could be a spin-off in history of people looking for lawsuits for assets out of compliance. Like, do you have any foresight into that at all? Anticipate?
I would say just focus on getting accessible. I mean, we're also trading into legal advice, and I have to be like, I am not an attorney, I cannot give legal advice, but definitely can't control what's going on in the environment. I will say that the statute's pretty clear that it does need to be a person with a disability that would be the plaintiff in any legal action, so that hopefully will mitigate that, but again, not an attorney, this is not legal advice, talk to your legal team. Yes?
So it seems like we might all be testing the same stuff, and not every government entity in the state of Colorado has got millions of dollars, and a lot don't have like teams, accessibility teams. Is there any way like OIT could, we would still have to make our own decisions, of course, but like could post overall accessible friendly companies or accessible friendly products, since you guys are either manually or, probably manually testing those things?
That is a good idea. I'll have to take that back to the leadership team. I'm kind of individual contributor level, so I wish I could say, yes, absolutely, but I have to pass that one up.
There's ramifications, I think, but
Yeah.
there could be a whole bunch of caveats put on that. But and then my other question is, we are sort of not testing everything. We are asking for documentation, and then so not testing deeply, but asking for maybe like a VPAT. And if it has substantial information on it, we're scoring it and things like that. But I didn't see that as an option.
Well, we really are trying to highlight an accessible first model. So these kind of judgment calls are definitely something you can think through as an organization and make the right choice for you. But my team in particular, we're really very focused on getting to 100% accessibility as much as humanly possible. I would say getting a VPAT is very helpful. And then also in the presentation, there is a link for a risk matrix that we put together that will help you make these kinds of decisions, but ultimately it's a management choice for the organization. Yes, Felicia in the back.
What resources are the TAP team offering now to help support us, whether it's weekly or via a web platform?
Thank you for that. So weekly, we have Accessibility Open Office Hours, which I lead, which is how I am here today. So if you are a State of Colorado agency, you're more than welcome to attend. We are limiting it to that because we have a lot of sort of inside baseball, State of Colorado stuff that we talk about. We are looking into other ways of communicating with local governments, and our senior solution engineer, Lori Kubitz, is the one who's taking the lead on that piece. And then also, we do have training available for those of you on the State of Colorado Learns platform on Cornerstone. We have 2 trainings that we already created, they're already rolled out. One is Digital Accessibility Fundamentals, and that's something that you could give to pretty much anyone who uses computers or tablets at your organization, and they would be able to get enough information to be dangerous. And then there's one that is Website Accessibility Fundamentals that's geared towards web content creators and communication staff that kind of goes to the next level to make sure that websites and those sorts of platforms are also accessible. And then we are continuously creating tons of training resources, just tons and tons. So does that answer your question? Awesome, I'm getting a thumbs up. I feel like I'm ignoring this side of the room. Anyone over here before? Yes.
About social media, you mentioned, if there's a problem with the actual site, but if there's a site that we use that has an accessibility problem, that we can't do anything about it, what are we expected to do? Stop using the site or?
Those are kind of management calls too. I would say ideally, in a perfect world, everything would be accessible, but unfortunately, especially when it comes to social media platforms and certain other large-scale providers, we are trying to do some work, and I would say if you can report it to their accessibility teams, a lot of the bigger organizations that are a little bit more slower to change have accessibility teams that you can report these issues to. For State of Colorado, we are actively working with the good folks over at SIPA and Tyler, Colorado, as well as Google to get through some of those platform issues as well. Way in the back in the yellow. We have some on our website. It's a process because local governments for us are kind of considered like, air quotes, the public. So we have to get it all approved by our comms leadership team. So we have a bunch of resources on our website that are already available. They're mostly informational resources, but we are working on trying to get YouTube videos going and a whole other, just suite of different tools to help satisfy the needs of a multitude of learners. Yes?
I was wondering if you could speak a little more about avenues for feedback from the public and meeting people where they are. I feel like the default is always an accessibility statement buried in the footer that might have an email to reach out to. Have you seen anything more robust than that?
Yes, and so I would say some state agencies are really doing great things, like the Department of Revenue here in front. They have their ADA requests and their accessibility statements together on the same page, which helps. We found, I actually used to work there, we found that people who are not state employees or local employees don't always see the distinction between accessibility and just general ADA requests. And so we merged it all together so that folks could find whatever they needed. And then the accessibility statement is literally everywhere. So, and I would say as we get closer, if you want to highlight it more, by all means, the easier you can make it for folks, the better. All right. Do we have any other last questions? Oh, down here in front.
I have a question. I just want to make sure that everyone knows that I know there's the difference between state employees and then local government. But the OIT accessibility webpage is public.
Yeah, that is public.
Yeah, so that, I think starting on that website, if you're a local government agency, that's really helpful because all of these resources are literally the ones that I use as a state employee. So really, it's kind of saying, here's the groundwork, here's the tools.
Yeah,
Go
but
ahead and do
with
it.
only 9 more months, it'd be so great if we could get our hands on that training.
Yes, and definitely preaching to the choir over here as the training partner for the state. I'm like, yes, please, like right now, but we have to do all the approvals. But yes, definitely thank you for the plug for the website. Everything that we can get to the public and to state and local governments is there. There's some stuff that is specific to state that we have on a second site, but anything that we have available that would be helpful for locals that we have approval to put out goes on oit.colorado.gov/accessibility. Any other questions? Yes, in the blue.
Been trying to clear up a question. How do we handle content that we do not create, that then is uploaded into a system that is not controlled by us, but the source of entry to that system is through CDC.gov. So we don't have, so if anybody sees it, they're going to see it as being our content, but it's really not. It was uploaded by, say, a citizen.
My question to you would be then, is it someone doing business on behalf of your organization, or is this a citizen submission?
Citizen submission. So say building plans. So say an architect uploads building plans for the building that's going to be built. As soon as that's uploaded to community planning development, that then becomes public record. That is now accessible through the same system that they uploaded it to the public. But I don't control the upload, the generation of that content, or where it's housed.
And I will say that this is one of the things that we did punt to rulemaking because it is unclear. So to be continued on that one, I'm afraid, but you're not the first folks to have asked about that. Any other questions? Not seeing any, so I'm going to, oh, sorry. Yeah, so if you, and this is a big if you have access to the State of Colorado Learns system, I know there's like 24 LMS systems for the state, so there's a lot, but if you have access to that one, there's digital accessibility fundamentals and website accessibility fundamentals, and if you don't already have access to it, your HR LMS administrator just needs to reach out to our training team at OIT, they say to make it discoverable, is the quote. Any other questions? Alrighty. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Will the slides be accessible on the website afterwards?
Yes, it will. And I spent a good amount of time to making it accessible also for people with disabilities. So to answer that question too. So yes, I'll be passing it off to the folks over at SIPA to get on the website here. And then with that, if you need anything, please reach out to us. We're here to help. We want to help. The main point of contact for us is OIT_accessibility@state.co.us. And then also, I will have a sign-up sheet down here at the front. If you really, really want to have the slides sent to you directly, you can give me your contact information, and I will personally email them to you. So with that, thank you so much for this robust conversation and for coming to hear me talk today. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Becky. I think we hit a pretty good topic here at the end, huh? Lots of questions and clearly lots more answers to come. So we are just so grateful for all of you for spending this much time with us. It's, almost close to the end of the day here, but I hope you got a lot out of the program today, particularly across those 3 areas that we were really hoping you would get that. And hopefully, again, in terms of Becky's presentation, you see a lot of that all come together because we have to work together to solve a really common problem that there's no doubt we're all in. So thank you, everybody, again, for a great conference. It's great to see you all.